Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Well, on the earth.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, December 17th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here at beautiful, legal Potland, Oregon, home of Rolla J Studios, and the strong silicone bong is by our side. We got a great show for you today, and a first here on the Russ Belville Show, at least as far back as I can remember, thinking of over 700 independent shows and 900 normal shows. I think today marks a first. I will be interviewing an active duty police officer today from Dallas, Texas. His name is Nick Novello, and he is a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which features all sorts of cops, prosecutors, judges, prison guards, etc. But they're almost always retired. It's very rare that we get one who's active duty, so I'm excited to talk to Nick. That'll be at 5:30 in our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment, so stay tuned for that. Also coming up on the show today, we round out our 5 different marijuana initiatives that we've been looking at. We've covered California, Arizona, Nevada, and yesterday Massachusetts. Today, we cover the great state of Maine, where they've got a version of CRIMLA up there, the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol. But unlike the other 3 CRIMLAs that MPP is backing in Arizona, Nevada, and Massachusetts, this one is actually the language that was proposed by Legalize Maine. And so it's quite different than the CRIMLAs that we've covered over the past few days. We'll talk about that in the Radical Rant coming up at the end of the show. So if you want to know all about Maine legalization, and it looks pretty good, folks, I got to tell you, stay tuned for the end of the show. Then also coming up on the show today, we are going to go behind the headlines. And in behind the headlines today, the DEA is allowing cannabis imports for the big pharma of marijuana. They're not not playing fair. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also on the show today, in the space of our drug war data mining, instead today we're going to do a little cannabis community chat. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Oregon with our medical marijuana program and how the legislature is trying to make some really unnecessary changes in some respects. We'll talk about that in our cannabis community chat. And then stay tuned in hour 2. I'm going to go on an extended rant about something I call West Coast medical marijuana privilege. You'll definitely want to hear that. I've been stirring up some controversy on Facebook over this topic for the past couple of days, and I just got to get a few things off my chest. That'll come up in the second hour of the show. Of course, all of that comes after this first break, and after our first break, we get into the Cannabis Radio News. In the headlines today, we're going to take a look at the lawsuit by Nebraska and Oklahoma to overturn Colorado's marijuana legalization. The Obama administration has weighed in on that lawsuit, and we'll tell you what they told the Supreme Court. In Kentucky, there is a Democratic senator there who is abandoning his cause to try to get medical marijuana in the state and instead is going all in on recreational marijuana in the state. We'll tell you why. Also, tomorrow, Delaware joins the other 18 states that have decriminalized possession of marijuana. We've got another Native American tribe looking to cultivate marijuana, and we'll tell you where. And speaking of decriminalization, another great American city has decriminalized marijuana. We'll tell you where when we get back with the Cannabis Radio News. All that's coming up here on the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a part of it. We really appreciate your support. The news is next, and we're back right after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
the son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. He moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, he stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system, funded by over 1 million contributions, tackling climate change to create clean energy jobs, fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders, husband, father, grandfather, an honest leader, building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
MJWellness.com, the largest medical marijuana community in the world. Connect with thousands of patients, doctors, industry leaders, and businesses through shared personal experiences along our worldwide network. Discover new therapies and benefits with content tailored to you. Come grow your network on MJWellness.com. You're not alone. Your wellness matters. Learn, live, and thrive. Check out MJWellness.com today.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Thursday, December 17th, 2015. The Obama administration is advising the Supreme Court to stay out of a dispute concerning legalized marijuana in Colorado in a case brought by neighboring states. In a brief filed with the court on Wednesday night, Solicitor General Donald B. Verrilli argues in part that the case is not properly before the court. The case highlights the tension between a state, Colorado, that has chosen to legalize marijuana, and others, such as Nebraska and Oklahoma, who say they are having difficulties protecting their borders from the increased flow of marijuana. Last spring, the Supreme Court asked for the administration's views as the justices decide whether to take up the case. Verrilli argued, quote, "Entering the type of dispute at issue here, essentially that one state's laws make it more likely that third parties will violate federal and state law in another state, would represent a substantial and unwarranted expansion of this court's jurisdiction," end quote. For years, Democratic Senator Perry Clark of Kentucky has sought to lift restrictions on marijuana for medicinal purposes, but his legislation has failed to get a vote in committee. In 2016, Clark plans to double down with the Cannabis Freedom Act, a measure that would allow recreational use for adults over 21. Clark admits that passing the legislation would be very difficult next year, but hopes to set the stage for more talks. The measure, which was pre-filed last week, would repeal Kentucky's criminal prohibitions on marijuana and establish a regulatory framework that permits the plant to be grown in the state and sold in retail stores. People over 21 could possess up to an ounce on their person and cultivate up to 5 plants for personal consumption, but the law would still prohibit lighting up in public. Those under 21 could also possess the drug if recommended by a doctor. Clark said his bill would set up a 3-tier licensing system similar to the alcohol industry to separate growers, processors, and retailers and prevent monopolies or vertical integration. The possession of small amounts of marijuana becomes legal starting Friday in Delaware, which joins 18 other states that have removed criminal penalties for carrying marijuana. With 4 states and the District of Columbia having legalized recreational possession of cannabis in the last 2 years, reformers hope smaller steps like Delaware's will pave the way for the defeat of prohibition nationwide. The Delaware State Legislature in June passed a bill removing harsh criminal penalties for simple possession of up to an ounce of marijuana, which had previously been punishable with 3 months in jail. It now becomes a civil violation with a fine, much like a traffic ticket. However, there are still a number of circumstances under which Delaware police can arrest a person for having marijuana. Smoking cannabis in public, for example, is still a misdemeanor, punishable by less than a year in jail. Members of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs will vote Thursday on a proposal to grow and process marijuana on the reservation and sell the product at tribal-owned stores in Portland and other Oregon cities. If the referendum passes and the state signs off on the plan, Warm Springs would be among the first tribes in the country to enter the commercial cannabis market. The tribes expect to have results Friday. It's a trend fueled by a federal memo issued last year that said the government would treat tribes as they do states when it comes to legal pot. But the debate over cultural, economic, and health risks, as well as complex legal issues, has most Native American tribes moving slowly on marijuana initiatives. Warm Springs is the first in Oregon, home to 9 federally recognized tribes, to put the issue to its members. People caught with a small amount of marijuana in the city of Pittsburgh will no longer automatically be sent to jail under legislation approved by the city council. The city council voted in favor of an ordinance to decriminalize possession of 30 grams or less of marijuana, a little bit more than an ounce. Police will have the option to issue a citation and a fine ranging from $25 to $100. Currently, punishment for possession is up to 30 days in jail and a $500 fine. Those in support of the legislation cite a similar law in Brooklyn that saved the city $2 million in funds no longer needed to pay for arresting, prosecuting, and sentencing marijuana users. Today's vote was a preliminary vote. There will be a final vote at the Pittsburgh City Council due next week. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Thursday, December 17th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville. Imagine life without taxes. Let New Era Certified Public Accountants, NewEraCPAs.com, handle your Cannabusiness 280E and tax strategy. Get your business prepared with New Era CPA's Cannabis Finance Bootcamp. NewEraCPAs.com, with years of experience in the industry, we are one of the nation's leading accounting firms for growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies from Washington to California. NewEraCPAs.com.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, where we don't change our mind on decriminalization during an election year.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
Today in Behind the Headlines, we've got a story from Mike Adams out at hightimes.com that says the DEA allows cannabis imports to facilitate the big pharma of marijuana. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has all but refused to acknowledge lawful cannabis producers as part of legitimate commerce here in the United States. But that has not stopped the agency from working with corporate drug pushers in the importation of cannabis products to be used to facilitate the big pharma takeover of the medical marijuana industry. A federal notice released earlier this month indicates that big government has given a New Jersey drug development company called Catalent Pharma Solutions permission to begin importing various forms of cannabis into the United States to be administered to patients in clinical trials. The finished pharmaceutical products containing cannabis extracts will be shipped to the company's research facility in Kansas City, Missouri, which develops and tests medications in oral dose forms. Catalent's vice president of corporate strategy recently told Inpharm Technologist, a news source covering the happenings of the international pharmaceutical trade, that there is a growing need for special handling capabilities in pharmaceutical development due to evolving characteristics of pharmaceutical and biotechnology pipeline molecules. And as these molecules transition to commercially approved products, similar complexities arise in production and distribution of commercial supplies. Basically, what this means is major drug manufacturers are paying Catalent big bucks to help engineer commercial medical marijuana products in a manner that will garner expeditious approval from the U.S. government. However, the bad news is this type of action resonates an obvious separation of those medical marijuana products that are sold in state-licensed dispensaries and medicine derived from the cannabis plant that is currently being created under the guidance of the federal government. While some insiders of the pot industry believe the emergence of brands such as Marley Natural and Willie's Reserve properly defines what is to be big marijuana, the fact that well-funded drug companies are still exploring methods of capitalizing on the medical cannabis sector, even after 23 states and the District of Columbia have established relevant programs, indicates the cannabis industry is on a devastating collision course. One of Catalent's clients is GW Pharmaceuticals, a British pharmaceutical company that Merrill Lynch recently cited in a report as being a major player in the cannabis industry. The drug company has been inside the United States for a couple of years, conducting clinical trials on their prized medical marijuana product Epidiolex, which is CBD in a spray form, in hopes of marketing an FDA-approved epilepsy treatment by 2017. As of now, GW is in phase 3 clinical trials for this medicine, which was recently deemed promising in combating treatment-resistant epilepsies such as Dravet syndrome. Unfortunately, the true monster of marijuana has a special luxury that remains unavailable to those companies selling pot products in retail outlets across the country: flexible DEA scheduling. A product like GW's Epidiolex, if approved, would likely be classified as Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 in order to become a part of the mainstream drug market. And while it is expected this medication will come with a hefty price tag, Epidiolex, unlike CBD oil being sold in places like Colorado, would also be covered under most health insurance policies. This very scenario happened over 3 decades ago with a THC pill called Marinol. That's Mike Adams reporting in High Times. I would just add to this that this is the box canyon of medical marijuana that we have been talking about for 6 years now. The logical endpoint of medical marijuana has always been and shall always be the development of individualized, molecularly consistent products that can be sold through pharmacies that are Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, and then will get paid for by health insurance. That's always been the direction medical marijuana was bound to head. There's just no other way this could have happened. The medical marijuana is on the decline, and there's not much we can do about it. If you want to have access to the whole plant, if you want people to be able to use marijuana medically, the fight now is for adult recreational legalization, because medical marijuana is going to go the way of GW Pharmaceuticals and all of these standardized dose-related types of non-smoked marijuana products. So it's time for all of us to start getting on board with the recreational legalization, personal use, no matter what the reason is.
I spent the last 2 years of high school in a daze.
Well, everyone, it's 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone. Happy 4:20 to our friends in Denver. And, of course, still thinking of my brother Matt, battling colon cancer in the Mountain Time Zone, non-legal, ultra-prohibition red state of Idaho. That's why I fight so hard for legalization. It won't get legal in Idaho until it's legal everywhere else. One state at a time. The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
The Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, the national wildlife refuge for marijuana unicorns.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life, conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult marijuana prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat. Welcome back, everyone. Today in the Cannabis Community Chat, I just want to talk a little bit about what's going on here in my home state of Oregon. While we have legalized marijuana for adult purposes, any purpose you choose, there is still a medical marijuana program, the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. And while our Measure 91 specifically said 3 times that this measure, the passage of this measure, was not to affect the operation of the medical marijuana program, there's nothing anybody could do to stop the legislature from making changes to the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, as well as the Oregon Health Authority, given the authority to regulate the program. So there's a few things that they're trying to change here that are problematic. And let me just run through a few of these. First of all, they are considering increasing the third-party grower fee. Now, it's already onerous enough to try to get on the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. You got to go see your doctor, and you got to collect 3 years worth of medical records that show at least 3 times in the past 3 years that you've been diagnosed or you're suffering from a condition that matches the condition list. So we're not talking like, Washington or California where you can just, say you got a backache and get yourself a card. No, in Oregon, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of records that you got to pull up to be able to get this. So that's already tough enough as it is. But then on top of that, the state requires that you pay a $200 fee to get your medical marijuana card. The highest fee of any of the medical marijuana states. There's 2 other states that have a $200 fee. One of them is New Jersey, but their card lasts for 2 years, right? Oregon, you got to get your card every year, so that's $200 to get your medical marijuana card, which is ridiculous when you're talking about some of these people's needs to be able to access medical marijuana. It's just way too expensive. Then we've also got a grower fee. Now, this was instituted a while back where if you wanted to have a third-party grow for you, it was going to cost $50 to pay for that extra grower card, right? And then a grower could take care of up to 4 patients. They want to raise that up to $200. So you've already got a patient who's spent $200-$300 going to the doctor, another $200 getting his medical marijuana card, and then you want to pull another $200 out of his pocket for a grower card? Why can't these people understand that there's plenty of money for the state coming in recreational marijuana? The Oregon Medical Marijuana Program has run a surplus every year. And in fact, it's been the little rainy day fund that the state has been dipping into to pay the bills for some of their other budget items. It's always run a surplus, so there's no need to pump more money into that program. They claim that all these extra regulatory hurdles that have been added to them are causing more costs for them, but that just doesn't hold any sort of water. That's just ridiculous. Like I said, they've been having a surplus. Use some of that surplus. And if you have to, get some of that recreational marijuana money. I'm cool with my tax money and my weed purchases helping out people who are sick. That's the way this should work. And that's the way it was originally passed by the people of Oregon, that it should be treated like every other medicine. They're also proposing a $4,000 fee for medical marijuana processors, the people who make extracts and edibles and tinctures. The stuff that medical patients need more than recreational patients. Not to say I don't like a cookie or a dab now and then, but those kind of products are desperately needed by the patients. Why put an extra $4,000 hurdle in the way of getting these people their medicine? Other things that they're proposing a new rule that dispensary workers who are medical marijuana patients can't smoke or vape at work. Now, this is an exception that had been in the law for a while, not in front of the customers or anything, but at some private out of the way location, a medical marijuana patient should be able to medicate. They want to take that ability away. These people have a hard enough time finding jobs that will allow them to be medical marijuana patients, since the state of Oregon allows employers to discriminate against us because of the metabolites in our system. Why take away another job possibility from a sick and likely poor person. That's ridiculous. And then another thing that they're changing, of course, the clean air rules are changing that will look to end the adult consumption private lounges, the cannabis cafes and such. And while a lot of people will look at this as being a recreational thing, oh, you're just getting together to get high or whatever, for some patients, those cafes, those meeting places are critical. They live in Section 8 housing. They live in public housing. They live somewhere where they're not allowed to inhale medication. They're not allowed to smoke. They're not allowed to vaporize. So they have to have some place to go to be able to use their medicine. And it's also a critical social gathering spot for people in the medical marijuana program to learn from one another. And a lot of these places like the Cannabis Cafe, the Northwest Cannabis Club, they hold special meetings just for patients to learn things about how to process marijuana or how to go about obeying the law. There's no legitimate reason we should be putting these roadblocks in front of the people who have legitimate medical need. Now, there are other things that they have changed about the law that I'm not as upset about, because I understand that they were trying to rein in some of the abuses of medical marijuana. And when we come back in hour 2, I'm going to talk at length about that part. But when it comes to protecting the patients, individuals on the individual level, these laws are going to hurt people. These laws are going to make it more difficult. And now, as we've got the recreational law, fewer of those, quote, scare quote patients are in the program, and the few that are remaining are the ones who do have this serious medical marijuana need that should be protected. It won't be too soon before we can get all of this worked out. We're back with Cops Say Legalize Drugs right after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com.
The Russ Belville Show, where the truth about marijuana gets more than a minute to speak.
Ganjapreneur.com, your guide to the cannabis business world. Ganjapreneur.com is a comprehensive resource for cannabis professionals and entrepreneurs. Download the Ganjapreneur app on your smartphone or tablet to catch up on cannabis industry news, scroll through our daily job listings, and learn about successful cannabis companies, executives, and investors. Ganjapreneur.com, helping ganjapreneurs grow.
One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: cops say legalize drugs.
Welcome back, everyone. 31 after the hour. Joining us on the telephone today for Cops Say Legalize Drugs is a man who I believe is my first active duty police officer on the show. We've got Nick Novello from the Dallas Police Department. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing good, Russ. How are you today?
I'm excited to be able to talk to you. I'm just honored that you would be here, and especially want to thank you for standing up for LEAP as an active duty officer. Is that difficult for you?
Well, I've been here 34 years. I'm in my early 60s, and so to be honest and blunt, no, it's not difficult for me at all. I am ostracized for the most part in the work environment, but, you know, Russ, I know that I'm doing the right thing. Quite frankly, I'm merely echoing what Hillary Clinton, Rick Perry, and 2 or 3 days ago, Michael Botticelli, the drug czar, said that the war on drugs had been a dismal failure and principally responsible for the high incarceration rate in the country. Well, my question, Russ, now is that we've admitted that. What's the next step? Are we going to implement something immediately to cease arresting and incarcerating people for their addictions, or was that just a cathartic moment?
Good question. And Nick here has been a veteran of the Dallas Police Department since 1982. In that time, Nick, was there any one moment, or was it just the buildup of all the moments that led you to speak out against this?
You know, Russ, about 25 years ago, I had what I might call a modified epiphany. I was on a street-level narcotics outfit, and it just so happened that I arrested the same guy for selling crack cocaine 3 times in 8 days. After the third time, I told the sergeant I was done. I would not risk my neck for what I thought was a very ineffective way of dealing with the drug problem. Little did I really understand at that time that it was a numbers game. And, you know, Russ, I tell people that the public information office with any police department has become as important as the actual patrol function, because departments around the country manage the information that they disseminate, and for the most part are in the business of manufacturing information based on public consumption. And very little of it has to do with the actuality of what's there. We know that the drug war, we've manufactured the criminal element for the most part. So for me, when I really became aware of that, I thought, you know, I want to speak to this while I'm still an active officer, because I don't want people to say the guy's disgruntled or now he's retired and he's doing it. I just felt a sense of urgency, and I have to tell you, if we don't begin to speak to these things now, we're going to have problems maintaining the culture. And I'm principally referring to the culture of freedom that we presently enjoy in the country.
Yeah, and we've seen as of late, the past 2 or 3 years, a new recognition among the people of just how this war on drugs has militarized our police and created, basically occupation zones in some of our cities. Speak to that, if you will, about how you've seen policing change in Dallas over the past 30 years and how much the war on drugs has had to do with that.
Well, Russ, my understanding when Robert Peel wrote those 9 principles of policing in 1829, they had everything to do with police doing a job that was, quite frankly, based on a social contract. I exercise the authority over Russ that he allows me to based on a social or contract. And that's based on the understanding that a society of freedoms, the first requisite there is order. And we're there to maintain that order, but I need you to support me in order to do my job. When you begin to see my actions as illegitimate or inappropriate, you cease to support me. And the actions I have to take to get you to comply are no longer really policing actions. They become more militaristic. And again, it's not an I-thou relationship. It becomes I-it. And I've seen that. I've seen the mindset set in that we've got to go out there and, again, incarcerate as many people because it's the way we fight this war on drugs. To me, when people like Botticelli and others say that addiction is it's a medical condition. It is a medical condition, and Peter Chris does such a wonderful job of addressing it. This is the only medical condition I know of in the country that we treat by incarcerating people. And we've lost the ability to do that. We don't have the resources, but Russ, I don't argue that. What I argue with people is all you need to do is look at the inner cities and see the carnage and understand that our culture will not maintain that very much longer. This is an important point with me. Heroin has become very problematic for middle-class America, especially Caucasian America. So they've reached out to the Justice Department, the drug enforcement people, and said, we want a more compassionate approach to this, and that's all well and good. I support that. But how about the 40 years that have passed and the people whose lives are defined by having been arrested? Jack Cole, who was one of the founders of LEAP, makes a fantastic point, and it's very sad, really, because he says, in America, you can survive an addiction. You simply cannot survive a conviction. And quite frankly, we're at the end of our rope with that. We don't have the resources. We have millions of Americans who we've defined that way. Personally, Russ, I see it as a caste system. We have those who've not been arrested for a narcotics violation, so to speak, and then we have the rest of the folks that have been arrested for some type of a narcotics situation or the use thereof, and now they're defined that way. They can't get employment. They can't go to school. How much more of this do we think our culture will withstand? That's part and parcel, in my estimation, of what's happening in Baltimore, Ferguson, New York. We've taken the hope from these people's lives.
Very well put. We're speaking with Nick Novello. He's an active duty police officer with the Dallas, Texas Police Department and a speaker for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. You can find out more at leap.cc. They've got a speaker near you who will come out and speak to whatever group you need him to speak to. Now, Nick, you mentioned Baltimore, Ferguson, New York City, and while the war on drugs has had a terrible impact on the communities of color in those places and elsewhere, it's also had a devastating impact on the culture of policing itself. According to your bio, this is something you've looked into with your website, Whistleblower Assist. Can you tell people about that and how we can get the good cops to out the bad cops?
Well, Russ, I've been doing this since 2007, and people ask me, can police themselves? Let me categorically say no. You have, for the most part, police are out here, they're trying to do a good job. They really are. The guys and girls on the street are really trying to do a good job. But the administrations, as soon, and this was my experience that I'm speaking to, and obviously others that we research, as soon as you go to your administration with egregious police misconduct, they come after you. And I went to the FBI on a Dallas police chief and nothing came of it. I went to the Homeless Alliance on criminal police conduct. I had an attorney sue the city of Dallas on behalf of the homeless. And you see things addressed to a point. And Russ, I think we're so far past the point of viable damage control that every department seeks to quash. It's very sad, but we do not have the mechanism in place to police ourselves. We need full accountability and transparency. Let me tell you, I think it's in today or yesterday's paper, the two officers being tried in Chicago said they wanted to have the mayor, Emanuel, testify because he had alluded to the thin blue line. And of course, his office is resisting that. I don't understand why we refuse to speak to the actuality of what's there. We don't address the need to be transparent and accountable. Well, what we end up with is a Friday night basketball league. It's just a little palliative, a cathartic thing. What we really need to do, we need to set up independent agencies, maybe funded by the state, to hold police accountable and to be absolutely transparent, because the American people are not asking for that today. Russ, they're demanding it. And unless we reestablish a strong bond of trust, we're not going to be able to police the streets of America.
Can the policing of the police happen without ending the drug war, though?
I personally think it's part and parcel. What do we say at this juncture? The drug czar himself has said it's a dismal failure and has resulted largely in the number of men and women that we have incarcerated. And, I got to ask you this, because maybe you can even answer this for me, but Hillary Clinton and Rick Perry both go on record as saying the criminal justice system has largely failed America, especially minority America. Now, my question is, are these sudden epiphanies, or are these comments made because they now carry political currency? But larger than that still, Russ, what do we do at this point in time? Do we continue to talk about this stuff, or do we take the next step and make change? We have the wherewithal to make change, and we need to do it because it's now not just a conversation, it's an imperative. We need to act.
Absolutely. Now, Texas, of course, where you're at, a tougher road to hoe than a lot of states. What do you see there as far as the prognosis for progress?
Well, I think you're starting to see folks marshal their resources. And, you know, Russ, I had a conversation with a real heavyweight civil rights person, and we both agree that when we're talking to someone about change, you don't reach out to them and say, hey, we're asking you to do the just thing. That's not going to happen. So when I speak to people, I say, listen, I'm asking you to do the thing that's in your interest to do, because you no longer have the luxury of saying you were in a prize. And moreover, should you act in your own interest, you'll be acting in the interest of many, many people to end this war on drugs. You know, one of the things, Russ, that I push, and I push real hard, and I want to see it happen in Dallas, is a pilot program using medicinal cannabis to wean people off hard narcotics. That's doable. The science is in place. It works. And if we're going to get away from mere language or verbiage and actually have something happen, that's the first step. We can use medicinal cannabis to wean people off drugs. You know, you ask me how I do this as an active cop. You know, I ask a lot of active cops. I ask lawyers, and sometimes I've had the honor of asking a judge, what do you do if it's someone you love? This is my touchstone, Russ. Invariably, they say, oh, if it's someone I love with an addiction, we get a lawyer and we get all the help we need. Well, that's the epitome of hypocrisy. I'm going to get all the help that I can get from my loved one, but I'm going to incarcerate everybody else in our culture. No, it just can't work that way. And until we understand that, we're going to continue to perpetuate this tautology of failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. Thank you so much, Nick Novello from the Dallas Police Department. And keep your head low. I want to make sure that you can still be an active duty cop for a while to come now. I hope this doesn't cause too many problems for you.
No, that's okay. And thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Nick, and appreciate you calling in. Stay tuned, folks.
Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you. When we come back, we'll have time for a radical rant. We're going to talk about the Maine Crimla, all the way up there in the Granite State. So, oh, no, wait, that's New Hampshire. What is Maine? I better look that up.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals, or at least they pay me to say that. A public service message from CannabisRadio.com and the Russ Belville Show.
MJWellness.com, the largest medical marijuana community in the world. Connect with thousands of patients, doctors, industry leaders, and businesses through shared personal experiences along our worldwide network. Discover new therapies and benefits with content tailored to you. Come grow your network on MJWellness.com. You're not alone. Your wellness matters. Learn, live, and thrive. Check out MJWellness.com today.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
All right, welcome back, everybody. In the rant today, we're finishing up our look at 5 state legalization initiatives, and today's initiative is the one for the state of Maine, the Pine Tree State, and it is the initiative to legalize marijuana in Maine. It was originally written by Paul McCarrier and the group Legalize Maine. And then there was a competing initiative from Marijuana Policy Project that was more restrictive called CRIMLA, Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. And in a first, MPP folded its campaign and got behind the grassroots campaign. And that's kudos to Paul McCarrier and the people at Legalize Maine for doing the due diligence to get the signatures and the backing and the funding and the organization necessary to convince MPP to join up with them. So as we're talking about this initiative now, it's the Legalize Maine language, but CRIMLA, Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, is the branding that MPP is using to push it. So it's not the same basic CRIMLA template that you had in Massachusetts, Arizona, and Nevada. It's Legalize Maine language, but just has kind of a CRIMLA shell, if you want to call it that. Anyway, this Legalize Maine language is pretty amazing. Let me get you the basics, of course. What everyone wants to know, how much can you possess? Well, in all the other states we've been talking about this week, people 21 and older can possess an ounce of marijuana. In Maine, you'll be able to possess 2.5 ounces of marijuana. That is fantastic. And in all these other states we've been talking about, you can possess 5 grams of concentrate or 7 grams of concentrate or 8 grams of concentrate, whatever it might be. And that has to be part of the marijuana you're allowed. So like if you got 28 grams of possession and 8 of it's concentrate, you only get 20 grams of flour, right? The total combined has to be an ounce. In Maine, cannabis is defined as the flour and the extract, the concentrate. So when Maine tells you you can have 2.5 ounces, you can have 2.5 ounces of concentrate, people. 2.5 ounces of extracts. Yeah. Pretty amazing. There's also the best cultivation of a recreational law that I've seen so far. Adults in Maine will be able to cultivate 6 mature plants. And you're thinking, well, 6, that's what you get in the California one and the Massachusetts and the Nevada and Arizona. What's the big deal, right? No. 6 flowering mature plants and 12 immature plants. An immature plant under the Maine law is defined as a non-flowering plant that's over 2 feet tall and over 1.5 feet wide, right? So you could have 12 vegetated plants ready to go into flower, and you can have your 6 mature plants that are in flower. And you can have unlimited seedlings, an infinite amount of seedlings. And a seedling is defined as a non-flowering plant that's below 2 feet in height. Everybody should be happy about this. I mean, 6 mature, 12 veg, unlimited seedlings. It'd be hard to ask for more than that. That's pretty amazing. Also, you'll be able to purchase up to 12 seedlings or immature plants from a grower. So you don't even have to start it at a seedling. You could go get yourself 12 vegetated plants, put 6 of them into the flower cycle, keep another 6 in the veg cycle for a while. Basically, your Papa Murphy's take and bake of weed. Now, there are some restrictions on the home grows. You have to have your landlord's written permission to home grow. So if you don't own your property, go get your landlord's permission. And they don't have to give it to you. And your home grow has to be out of public view. Now, there is one part about this. This is kind of weird because none of the other legalization laws are doing this. But you have to tag all your plants in your home grow. With, like I imagine you can get those little wire twisties you get at the bulk foods, But you have to get something to tag your plants, and every tag on every plant has to include your name and your Maine driver's license number. Now, what that tells me is that only Maine residents can cultivate marijuana, right? Because I don't have a Maine driver's license. I'd have to be a resident of Maine to get one, wouldn't I? So yeah, that is one little chink in the armor, so to speak. Another point that's important is that all of this cultivation limit, 6 mature, 12 immature, unlimited seedlings, is in addition to what you can cultivate medically. If you're a medical marijuana card holder in Maine, this is in addition. Right here, marijuana cultivation for medical use is not considered cultivation for personal use. So therefore, if you're allowed X number of plants under medical and Y number of plants among recreational, and neither of them are each other, then X plus Y is how many plants you end up getting out there in Maine. There's also a prohibition on public toking. You can't smoke pot anywhere you can't smoke tobacco, right? If it's a no smoking zone, it's a no smoking zone. And you get a $100 fine if you violate that. So pretty standard what we've seen. And the tax rate on the marijuana in Maine is going to be 10% point of sale tax. So not bad on the taxes. Massachusetts has lower, 3.75 plus a local 2%. So not bad though, compared to most of the rest of the states. Now, taking a look at the commercial angles on this and some of the definitions and such, Maine also has a definition for mother plants. So in addition to seedlings, immature plants, mature plants, they also have a definition for mother plants for the cultivators. That's helpful. And Maine, okay, so we've been talking about how California, Massachusetts, Nevada, and Arizona all might allow for pot lounges. Maine will allow for pot lounges. Guaranteed. They have a definition of a retail marijuana social club. There will be pot lounges in the state of Maine. Now, a couple of the other details, of course, is going to be testing and labeling for potency and THC and CBD, and testing for the pesticides, mold, mildew, fungi, contaminants, all that kind of stuff. That typical stuff you'd expect. But when it comes to retail marijuana, has to be out of public view. That the advertising has to be can be restricted. Not supposed to advertise to kids. You can't get a license if in the past 10 years you were convicted of a drug crime that qualifies for 5 years imprisonment or longer. That's kind of an interesting way to put it, because it's not misdemeanor, it's not felony, it's not by type of drug, but it's if you could have been sentenced, and not that you were sentenced, but you could have been sentenced for 5 years or more, then for 10 years you're disqualified. 10 years of that conviction, you're disqualified from being a licensee. Other people that are disqualified from being licensees, cops, state licensing officials, and local officials cannot be licensees. When it comes to giving out the licenses, medical marijuana licensees have the first priority, especially if they're a caregiver with 3 or more patients that they're caring for. There will be a criminal background check on the licensees. And licensees are allowed to hold all types of licenses except tester. If you're a tester, that's the only license you can hold. But you can be a cultivator and a processor and a retailer and a marijuana social club. You can have all 4 licenses. And in fact, the law specifically provides for cultivators to have their own shops and for processors to have their own cultivation. So you combine all that together. And of course, retail shops can also be social clubs. Add it all together, you could have all 4 licenses. So you could have your own little self-contained grow, process, sell, and smoke lounge, which would be pretty cool. And again, the medical marijuana licensees get first priority for the first 60 days of licensing. After 60 days, they'll open it up for everyone. And if there's too many applications for the stores, the priority goes to cultivators who've been growing for 2 years or more, and then to caregivers who have 3 or more patients. Also, while you can have multiple different licenses, you can't have more than one of the same license if that would prevent someone else who's qualified from getting a license. So, like if, let's say my town only allows 2 pot shop licenses and I've got one of them, if someone else qualifies and is applying for the other license, I can't have that other license. But if there's no one else applying, if I'm the only qualified person, then yeah, I could have 2 pot shop licenses in the same town, or 2 grow licenses, or 2 cultivation, or whatever. Now, there's not going to be a hard limit on the total number of pot shops in the state, but localities, or as they call them, municipalities, can limit or prohibit any type of license. So you could have cities that have absolute bans on pot shops and everything. That could happen. And when it comes to total cultivation, there is a limit. The state can set limits either by plant count or by total canopy space. And the limit for licensing is a total of 800,000 square feet for the whole state. 800,000 square feet for the whole state. And it's interesting how they break this up. There's going to be 2 types of grow licenses in Maine, small and large. They don't call it that. That's what I'm calling them. The small licenses are the grows that are 3,000 square foot or smaller. The large licenses are the grows between 3,000 and 30,000 square foot, which will be the max, 30,000 square foot. And the way that you pay for your license is that you'll be buying what are called unit blocks for your grow. And a unit block is 100 square feet, 10 by 10. So if you want to have that 3,000 square foot grow, that's 30 unit blocks. If you want to have that 30,000 square foot grow, that's 300 unit blocks, and each unit block costs a certain amount. And 40% of the grow licenses in Maine have to go to those small size grows. There's plenty more to take a look at in the Maine Crimla. I'll have my highlights of this posted on marijuanapolitics.com later today. Also, you can check out the hyperlinked reformatted text of all 5 initiatives available through my Scribd account. Just go to rad-r.us/MJ2016. All lowercase, rad-r.us/MJ2016. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Introducing the YMCA.